Republican North Texas Congressman Michael Burgess, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for
This week you announced that you will not run for re-election next year, and I'm wondering why you came to this decision and how long have you been considering it? And was there anything in particular that made you feel that it was time?
Well, look, it's no secret in this political season, there's been a lot of talk about the age of representatives and candidates. And I am getting to that point myself. I don't know how many years I have left, but do I want to invest what I have left in what's going on up here? And maybe not. I've served, and I hope I've served well. And it's time to let someone else take the reins.
And along those lines, did 2024 and the outcome of the House itself, in other words, were Republicans going to retain the House in 2024, or are they going to lose it and be back in the minority? Did that play any role in your decision?
No, not really. I mean, I've served in the minority here before. That's not a I don't intend for Republicans to be in the minority after the 2024 elections. The times past when there has been a change, when there's been a shift in the political makeup of the House, you can kind of tell going into it. This time, in my opinion, there is no indication that that things are going to change significantly. So I would expect Republicans to be in the majority in the next Congress.
You spoke about the decision that you and your wife, you had this big talk on Sunday morning. It seemed as if that, people were surprised by this decision. It seems like you didn't really let on to anybody until you made that announcement. Is that right?
No, that's right. You know how things are, and the minute people start talking about something, then it becomes it takes on a life of its own. I knew that if this was going to be the decision, I was home. I was in Texas. I knew I needed to talk to my staff and let them know what I was doing and why I was doing it. I wanted to have that talk first, and I did. I came back to Washington and had the entire DC staff in the office, and we put the district staff on the speakerphone so everybody heard what I had to say at the same time. And yeah, I expected to catch some people off guard. No one was actually expecting that to be the subject of the meeting. But again, Jack, when it's time, you just know it's time. But I feel very good from the standpoint. Look, I was cruising into a re-election with no significant primary opponent. I actually had a lot potentially ahead of me in the next Congress. I'll probably be the top Republican on the Rules Committee, chairman if we retain the majority. So there were a lot of things to look forward to. At the same time, I am getting older. As my wife pointed out, my grandsons need me and need my participation in their lives much more than they ever have before. And quite honestly, this job is hard on your family. And my wife has given up a lot for me to have this time in service. And it was time to draw it to a close. But I would just stress, there was nothing that was forcing me to make the decision. Again, I had probably one of the clearest political runways ahead of me that I've ever had. No opposition had identified itself. Even times past, I've had 3 or 4 primary opponents, but didn't seem that way this time. And it's just a good feeling to go out on top, and no one's pushing you out. You go out on your own terms.
What do you believe are your top accomplishments while in office? What are you most proud of?
Well, there's several of them. Obviously, in the healthcare field, there have been a number of things that have happened. I got rid of some of the very bad and onerous provisions in how docs are paid by Medicare, and a formula that was deeply flawed. So that was almost 10 years ago. There are new challenges in that front, and even just on Wednesday had a markup in committee where I had another bill that did pass through subcommittee. We're working on that same problem. On the energy side, look, we have on the Energy and Commerce Committee, I've been there since 2005. Some of the biggest changes in energy policy have in the last 20 years have come through the Energy and Commerce Committee, and I was there for all of them. I participated in all of those, perhaps starting with lifting the ban on export of crude oil from the United States in 2015. Remember, we were stuck in that 2008 recession and just didn't seem to be able to break out of it. When that policy changed in December of 2015, you could look at any measure of the economy, whether it's GDP, whether it's employment, whether it's the stock market, and there is an obvious inflection point in January of 2016. And look, the Energy and Commerce Committee takes that's why that happened. And I was there when it occurred. The Energy Policy Act of 2005, which set the stage for the abundant natural gas that we have in this country now. Fracking really wasn't a thing before then. We made some policy changes that allowed that to really come forward. So I've just been very fortunate to be on the front lines of some big changes that have happened in both healthcare and in energy.
Regarding energy, what's your take on the administration's policy as it relates to natural gas and drilling, et cetera? Because when you look earlier this year and even last year, when gas prices were rising, there was a lot of criticism of the oil companies, but they were trying to make up money from when they lost a lot of money. They lost their shirts during COVID.
Sure.
And so I'm wondering, how do you perceive what's going on right now as far as drilling, as far as exports, et cetera?
Well, obviously that sector of the economy has recovered. They were, as you say, flat on their back during the downturn of the economy that accompanied the coronavirus. The decisions that the Biden administration made about depleting the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, absolutely horrendous, should have never happened. It was done to save the president's skin in a midterm election. But let's be honest, Strategic Petroleum Reserve is there for a national emergency, not for a political emergency, but that's the way the Biden administration treated it. And it's, as we look at the world today and what's happening today with the difficulties that are occurring in the Mideast and Ukraine and the Russian aggression and what's happening with China and Taiwan, it would be great to have our Strategic Petroleum Reserve at full capacity, but we don't. And the administration really hasn't outlined a policy for recapturing the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. They were only interested in the short-term gain, and they used it for that. And again, quite honestly, I think we need to change policy to prevent a future president for encouraging that kind of drawdown when it's only for political reasons.
Has it been replenished?
No.
So let me ask you about what's happened this week, because obviously the federal government is set to run out of money at 12:01 a.m. on Saturday. The House voted yesterday on the Speaker Mike Johnson's two-tiered plan.
Yes.
And I believe you were among those who supported that.
Correct.
A, why is that? And B, does this prevent a shutdown from occurring, do you believe?
Yes, obviously the Senate is going to have to take up and pass what we passed yesterday. But what I hear from that side of the Capitol is that they will, and that obviously will avoid an appropriations lapse. Look, an appropriations lapse or shutdown, as people like to say, never accomplishes anything. It creates a lot of difficulty for people like air traffic controllers, TSA agents, soldiers, and people who are defending the country, who have their paychecks frozen for a time. They're told they're essentially employees. They still got to show up on the job. There is a possibility that they will not get paid. In fact, they always do. Congress always comes back and replenishes the money that wasn't paid at the proper time. So again, there's no money that's saved in an appropriations lapse, and oftentimes it costs additional dollars to actually get out of that. So I think the prudent thing to do was to avoid that shutdown, as people say, avoid that appropriations lapse. There's really nothing to be gained by that. I've been here before when that has happened in 2013 and 2018. And what's the famous saying? There's little educational value in the second kick of a mule. I don't need to go through it again to know it's bad policy.
So a lot of Republicans, though, in the House in Texas, including Texas, voted against it. They say they wanted more cuts in spending. What's your thought about that?
Well, the cuts in spending are still available to us if we will do our work and come together. We've got a pretty narrow majority on the House, and we can't expect Democrats to come to our aid if the approach is we really want to reduce spending. At the same time, the appropriations bills that have been reported out of the Appropriations Committee, some that passed on the House floor, all of those show significant reductions in spending. The Appropriations Committee has worked very hard to get the excesses from the coronavirus funding out of the federal budget. And I think that's right. I think they should. Unfortunately, because of the disagreements with some on our side, within the Republican side, the appropriations bills are not allowed to come to the floor. Just on Wednesday, there was a defeat of a rule that would have allowed the Labor, Health and Human Services and Education appropriations bill to come to the floor. Significant cuts. 60 agencies were eliminated or reduced. $60 billion was saved in the spending bill, and yet we couldn't get it on the floor because the rule couldn't pass. And it's just very discouraging. You're never going to get out of the problem if you don't do your appropriations work. And then at the same time to say, and I don't like omnibus bills, I don't like continuing resolutions. Well, I don't either. But if you don't do the appropriations work, you've got no other mechanism to fund the government.
And on that, we'll have to leave it there. North Texas Republican Congressman Michael Burgess, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jack.